I'm going to use this video to address the allegations made against me. Recently, to those who are unaware, I've been accused of grooming a 15-year-old boy when I was 19. That I'm some kind of predator and was aware of his age all along. This is categorically untrue and a complete lie.
Over the past month, I've made 2 videos and a written document calling out Pyrocynical for his poor responses to allegations that were made against him, as well as the commentary community's analysis of the situation. Recently, Pyrocynical released a video addressing these allegations, with the Google Doc I created being at the forefront, and made some points that I'm going to respond to in this video. A lot of people have taken his response at face value, similarly to his initial Reddit response. I went into this situation completely anticipating this response because, well, he's Pyrocynical. Regardless of the truth, Pyro is a widely beloved and respected creator, and people want to see him come out from this on top. My first issue with Pyro's response comes down to framing and misrepresentation, which he ironically accuses me of in the video. He opens it up by talking about the accusations of grooming and being some sort of predator, and then makes the rest of the video about my document and videos made about my document, as if I was accusing him of either of these things.
Recently, to those who are unaware, I've been accused of grooming a 15-year-old boy when I was 19. That I'm some kind of predator and was aware of his age all along. This is categorically untrue and a complete lie. The supposed proof for these insane allegations is paper thin and embarrassingly wrong.
He says that the allegations are insane, as if they're so ridiculous to the point that any of it could possibly be true. However, as time goes on, he has to make multiple concessions and admit to most of it. This is a misrepresentation of my videos and my intentions. He's moving the goalposts. It's an attempt to shift the focus of the video on disproving those allegations and conflating them with what I actually said. By responding to my points in tandem with points that I never even made, and not even clarifying who made the argument, he makes it seem as if these are all from me, but they're just not. In my original video, I flat out said that there was no evidence of grooming and that he's not a pedophile. She even pointed to his age being younger than 15 and said that while the age gap was bad, she doesn't think that it constitutes grooming. And I agree completely. It may not constitute grooming. And in the follow-up document I released about it, I made the claim that I didn't really know either way, leaving it up for the readers to decide. Is Pyrocynical a groomer? While I first stated no, after these new leaks, I don't feel comfortable saying no. That being said, Ivory's basic message can be legitimately proven to be true. When he was 19 years old, Pyrocynical messaged a 15-year-old sexually. Pyro frames this as a disingenuous move on my part.
This document is cowardly. I mean, like, the ending is no exception. Like, they don't even definitively state if I groomed anyone. They just leave enough room for people to draw that conclusion themselves without openly saying.
But in reality, this was me doing my best to put all of the information on the table and allow some room for interpretation for what people think. I intentionally didn't make a judgment call, and I tried to make more non-definitive statements in the document as more information was, and still is, coming out. I wanted anyone to be able to draw their conclusions about the topic. This is not malicious or cowardly in any way, as Pyrocynical claims. Another way he tries to frame me as being disingenuous is by claiming that the document leaves so much out, because I don't say until later in the document that he never sent nudes.
They also post a screenshot of Ida saying that I did this with everyone. There's this one part of the doc that claims that people make the mistake of not watching an entire video before they pass judgment. And this is like bitterly ironic. You make that claim, but you leave so much out of my original statement. It's written with like such cruel intentions, and it waits until page 16 out of 19 only then to confirm that I never actually sent or received nudes.
While this is the case, this wasn't a malicious move, and this isn't really a point I even had to acknowledge because the original accusations had nothing to do with sending naked pictures of himself to anyone. He claims that I hid this detail in the middle of a paragraph, but it's right there. I can't hide the words, you just have to read it.
It also tries to twist conversations like this one. You know, like claiming that this isn't part of the roleplay, but discussing the hypothetical of having sex with Ivory. No context, no conversation before, no conversation after. You're just meant to interpret this as 100% I wanted to have sex with him in person.
And as for the idea that I twisted it from roleplay into actual conversations about sex, well, that's exactly what it was. You're telling this guy that you're going to eat his cock up with your ass, and at the same time claiming that this has absolutely no basis in reality, which is ridiculous because that's exactly what you're fantasizing about doing. Roleplay itself is literally fantasizing about having sex and sexual interactions. I don't know how he would even try to make this point. You could make the argument that you're just imagining your personas having sex, but this doesn't line up with the actual DMs between Ivory and Pyro, where he says stuff like, I bet your cock is so hard from imagining that, and I bet that turns you on. This even lines up with the messages between Ivory and Ida, so the idea that this is all just nothing doesn't really make sense to me. Let's elaborate a bit. Fetish mining is a technique used by people with unconventional fetishes to either normalize or rope participants into their gratification. For example, if someone had a foot fetish and asked people for photos of their feet for innocuous reasons. This, by definition, is what Pyro was doing in his defense, as we even see in prior allegations. He would first initiate a conversation joking about the fetish, and if they showed interest, he'd then escalate it. He'd get them to either draw art of his fetish, or if they were engaged enough, roleplay with him. And just like in the foot fetish example, there's nothing inherently sexual about the photographs, or in this case, the personas, but the exploitative part is that he's jerking off to it. And he downplays it so heavily by calling it furry stuff and cringe shit, while in other parts of the video, he admits it's what he jerks off to almost comedically.
The cringer furry stuff with someone else.
This is just porn for him. This is what he gets off to, so framing it like it's not a big deal is incorrect. You say you never saw Ivory sexually, but you're masturbating to the idea of, once again, eating his cock up with your ass and talking about his dick. How on earth is this an adequate explanation? Pyro's strongest point from the video comes from the idea that the minor DM came after Ivory had turned 16, which he claims nullifies it.
As for the other message, I don't remember seeing this message, and I'm not sure why it's being used as proof that I knew he was 15, because if you compare the dates, this message was sent 2 months after he sent me his link with his age in bio.
And I would concede on this point if Pyro had stopped talking to Ivory once he learned of the age gap, which he didn't, and Pyro admits this in the video.
In retrospect, I never should have continued the furry stuff with him once I learnt of his age, even though at the time, I didn't see it as a problem.
Additionally, the idea that simply because he wasn't dating Ida at the time, she would have no reason to talk about Ivory's age to him is kind of laughable. Pyro frames this as if they were barely friendly at the time, when Ida clearly says that they were calling every other day in DMs, and we can see group chats from this time when they were all together. Art from 4 years ago, where she draws art reflective of his fetish, is also publicly available online. His argument here is basically that despite the fact they knew each other, were in group chats together, Ivory had talked about his age with other people, including people they both knew, was very vocal about his age on Twitter, that he still just didn't know and was somehow hiding it from Pyrocynical. And hey, it's fine if you disagree, but a lot of people see this as circumstantial enough to think that he must have known. It's not irrational.
The document fixates on this specific fact that people withdrew information while ignoring so many points like what I mentioned earlier.
Pyro claims that the document fixates on people who Pyrocynical cited as pointing to Ivory lying. This is pretty disingenuous, as it was a minor point in my video and in my document, but the reason why I included this was to show that this narrative falls apart extremely quickly. In the Reddit response, Pyro used unverifiable he said she said situations to claim that Ivory shouldn't be trusted and lied about his age. While Pyro himself never says he was lied to, his fans immediately took this as ample evidence that Ivory was a liar. It was also used to spread a false narrative about an 18+ Discord server where they supposedly met, which I've already debunked pretty well, and Pyro doesn't even acknowledge it in the video because it didn't happen. Pyro claims that false accusations are being made about him, but in his original Reddit document, he posted unsubstantiated screenshots with no evidence in an attempt to discredit Ivory and push a narrative that he lied about his age. This led people to spreading these screenshots and in turn, rumors across Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube, where they tried to say that these baseless accusations were sufficient to say that Ivory's entire original narrative was completely false. This is just untrue. If Pyro is going to criticize me for discussing these allegations, he should also apologize for signal boosting allegations he himself had no idea to the validity of. Their inclusion in the original Reddit post was nothing short of malicious.
The problem is I have with this drama that there is no middle ground. Originally, Ivory was labeled as a manipulative clout chaser that could do no wrong, because people chose to believe my screenshots over his.
In one part of the video, he claims that he has a problem with people calling Ivory a clout chaser, but the reason why anyone did this to begin with is because in his response, he made a clear implication about Ivory not caring when someone who was irrelevant had messaged him in the same sexual manner. This is vitriol that he himself bred. He can't retroactively complain about it as if he did nothing wrong. Now let's talk about the idea of them meeting. Pyro claims that while he did plan to meet Ivory, it was never for any sexual reasons and there was no ill intent behind it.
It's a blanket statement of Pyrocynical groomed me. The only thing I can possibly think of is inviting him and a bunch of other people to an event in the UK. And somehow this got spun as me buying him a plane ticket to fly him out to have sex with him.
So let's pan back and look at the context of these messages within the conversation history. Firstly, once again, as a clarification, Pyro's messages here are deleted. And as for the idea that he was deleting his messages because the content of them was very fetish stuff, this doesn't really seem to line up either. The idea of Pyro being a furry freak has been a joke in the community for a while. He even held his own phone up to his camera to show his fat thing in the background. His own girlfriend, who he is public about dating, draws this shit regularly and has been doing so for years. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together, man. This doesn't really add up. Ivory asks Pyro when he can visit him on May 6, 2017. The last reference in text to sexual roleplay prior to this was April 29th. Pyro claims that he invited Ivory to the event indiscriminately, but reading the messages, we can see that this isn't possible because Ivory initiated the conversation. It would contextually make no sense. The actual messages indicate they were looking for any chance to meet up, and the event simply happened to be a convenient time to do it. I can already hear people blaming Ivory for initiating this conversation, but again, Pyro was the adult here, and because all of Pyro's messages were deleted, we're only able to speculate as to why it was brought up.
I never thought in my life I'd have to ever justify something like this, but I do remember back in 2017, Niall invited me and a bunch of other people to drink with him. And I remember telling Niall very last minute that I couldn't come, so I pretty much flaked on him. To say something sexual was going to happen in a very public event with a load of people, even people Niall didn't even know and wasn't really close with, it's just false. Seriously. There's just no question about that.
Sive Morton is then brought in to downplay this, stating that it was a public event and a lot of people who Pyro didn't know were invited as well. This is all irrelevant. Do you think Ivory would have just flown home after a night of underage drinking? And do you think that nothing sexual happens after public events? This doesn't refute anything that I said. This could only refute a definitive statement claiming that they met up for sex, which some people did do, and I don't support. And what was Sive trying to imply when including that people he wasn't close with would be there? You were frequently messaging this person over Discord about your fetishes, talking about your kinks with them and what you're interested in, to the point where Ivory was comfortable disclosing his sex life to you. Even though it's framed as a refute, nothing Sive said changes anything. Does this mean Pyro had plans for something to happen? Not necessarily, but it's not off the table.
The document also tackles a tweet Ivory made where he says he hates me and I'm a leech. This was a copy pasta and it was like so easy to disprove. The majority of people found out as soon as you like copy pasted the actual tweet into the search bar. I didn't even think to mention this in my original statement because it was totally beside the point. I think it was included here as a way to make Ivory's claims seem more genuine without having to do any actual work.
Pyro claims that I used the situation of someone calling Ivory a clout chaser and then easily disproved it as a way to make Ivory seem more credible. This was not to boost my own credibility, but to highlight how poorly substantiated the character attacks against Ivory were. It's not my fault that your audience spread it in the first place because you bolster them by signal boosting random people defaming Ivory. So the majority of people did not find out because barely anyone in the situation did any research at all.
On a side note, unrelated to this doc, I've actually seen screenshots circulating around of someone who drew like fan art of my Fox character back in 2016. I then apparently replied to them like jokingly saying not thick enough and then asking for their age, and they said 15. So when people saw this, they instantly drew parallels to the grooming allegation. I asked them for a thick version and they drew this, which isn't even really that different from previous things they drew before even getting into contact with me. I didn't commission it. What was drawn wasn't pornographic. They'd drawn very similar stuff before, and there was no roleplay here, it was nothing. And the thing is, this wasn't even a call-out post. The person that made the original video just said it was funny.
Pyro also points to an instance where his character was being drawn by someone who he knew was 15 years old, after he asked them to, which I brought up here in a tweet. He claims that there was nothing pornographic about the drawing, and while on a technicality he may be right, if we zoom in on the image that he shows in the video, we can see his Fox character wearing underwear with a bulge, as well as turned around with its ass drawn in detail. If this isn't not safe for work, I don't know what is. Pyro claims that he was responding that it should be thicker as a joke, but in the DMs between Ivory and him, he would often say could be thicker in regards to situations like this, which he admits to getting off to. So it's not a leap in logic at all to say that this is the kind of stuff that would satisfy him sexually. It literally is, by his own admission. Once again, that defense is characteristic of fetish mining. And as for the person making the accusation claiming that they weren't particularly hurt by it, that doesn't really change the fact that this is evidence of Pyro being open enough about this to ask someone, who he knew was 15 years old, to draw it for him. It's just fucking weird. The best thing that Pyrocynical did in his response was finally admit that he fucked up in a way that felt at least a little bit sincere.
Now, I do want to directly say something to Ivory and apologize to him and to anyone else that I did the furry roleplay garbage with. What seemed consensual and reciprocal may very well not have been.
But a lot of that is negated by him continuing to twist things, especially my own words, and this situation to bend to a scenario where he is a victim. A few weeks ago, he was spreading bullshit about Ivory, and now he feels bad all of a sudden. The accusation of Pyrocynical being a pedo or a groomer has been dropped for weeks by most people, and I have rarely seen anyone of importance saying this. A few people may assert it or imply it, and I want to take control of this right now and say that I don't support anyone calling him him a pedo, because there's no adequate evidence to say that. And claiming that I have made false allegations against Pyrocynical is simply untrue. My document points to a body of circumstantial evidence that leads me to believe, in tandem with other situations, that he knew Ivory's age, which frankly I still believe, and I'm unconvinced by Pyro's video. But his apology never would have happened if I hadn't made my videos and released my document. All that would be out there would be his Reddit post, which I personally was not satisfied with his response. However, I'm not blameless, and there are two concessions that I'd like to make. Firstly, I'll apologize for my comparison to Red Kiwis from my original document. That wasn't a fair comparison to make. I had some friends of mine reach out to me about that at the time that I released the document, and you know what? That's completely fair. These two situations are not worth putting side by side, and it wasn't right of me to do so. Additionally, Pyro's point about him being suspended on Twitter was fair, and it made a few of the points in my document significantly weaker. A decent portion of the document was dedicated to claiming that Pyro knew the age when he was 15. Admittedly, Pyro did a good job of defending himself from that in this case. However, when he was 16, Pyro admitted to having known about his age and continuing to talk to him in his video. And even apart from that, he doesn't even come close to making everything incorrect. At the time that the original screenshots were released, Pyrocynical never explicitly stated in his Reddit response that he kept talking to Ivory, simply that he didn't have his age in his bio until he had turned 16. This is because he felt he didn't have to, so his fans gave him the benefit of the doubt and assumed that he had stopped talking to him. But once more evidence came out in my videos, he had to admit it. There was no tiptoeing around it. And my document itself is a small portion of this greater picture.
The amount of deceptive, fabricated bullshit to leave his greasy lips is absolutely astounding. Firstly, let me give you an example of how Keemstar is a liar by trying to expose me as some kind of furry.
Now, let's take a step back in time. In 2016, Keemstar rather notoriously accused Pyro of having a relationship with a 15, 14, 13-year-old French girl.
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France, all right? That he was technically like a pedo or a weirdo or something, right?
And as you may recall, Pyro succinctly debunked these allegations. He highlighted how Keem couldn't seem to keep her age consistent, and traced it back to 3 anonymous individuals who he claims admitted themselves to not know what they're talking about in this video.
And if that wasn't bad enough, Keem is now trying to spread even more bullshit, saying that I'm dating underage girls and saying outright on stream that I'm a pedophile.
Public perception of these events is that the entire story was fabricated by Keem as some sort of petty revenge for a YouTube conflict. Apart from the fact that multiple aspects of this callout later turned out to be flagrantly false, like Keem supposedly leaking Pyro's face despite it being in multiple public videos already, few know the actual evidence towards the French girl allegations. On June 11th, 2016, 2 days after Pyro's video, Keemstar tweeted out screenshots from the French girl in question in which Pyro plainly stated that they had a relationship and that he was happy to wait for her to turn 16. This implied that there was far more merit to the allegations than first believed. But how would we know that this screenshot is real? Well, Pyrocynical himself confirmed that they were when released. On his subreddit, he wrote a long response to the leak, where instead of denying their validity, he tries to explain away each message point by point. He claims that the relationship was just a friendly relationship, and that he only said relationship once in the screenshot. However, he then states that he was happy to wait for her to hit 16, meaning nothing sexual transpired, and he was happy to wait for her to reach the age of consent if they were to ever have a proper relationship. So they never had a relationship, but he was waiting for her to reach the age of consent just in case, and then admitted in later edits that he didn't even know what the age of consent was in her country, something that he seemed so ardent about in his current video. Pyro then reveals he'd since contacted the girl to ask if she'd sent the screenshot, to which she denied and believed to have been hacked. I'm not going to speak to the circumstances surrounding these allegations because I know there are people behind the scenes who are involved in reopening their files on top of files, but I wanted to bring it up to highlight just how much it mirrors the current allegations. Pyro manipulated the situation to make it appear baseless. He made it seem as if Keem had entirely fabricated the story, not acknowledging in his video that the girl did in fact exist. Once Keem produced evidence and he couldn't deny the relationship anymore, he tried to discredit the message through attacking the leakers, implying that they had hacked her account and that they simply had a vendetta. Pyro's fan response was similar, assuming the messages were fake because the dates were written in European format. You know, something you'd expect if one of the parties lived in Europe. And to this day, even those closest to him think that these messages are fake in spite of him never flat out denying it and admitting to them being real. Pyro has a pattern of behavior in which he rides off the benefit of the doubt. He will fabricate the best excuse he can based on the known evidence, then adjust it when more information comes out. At first, it was Keemstar lied, it's all made up, and Pyro doesn't even mention whether or not the girl exists. He simply calls Keemstar a slanderer and says he's looking into legal action, which, of course, never happened. He turns the situation into a meme by making jokes about it and making fun of Keemstar, as he did in the present day by having Colossal read his DMs and laugh at them. It makes it all seem a lot less serious. Then, all of a sudden, once Keemstar produces the screenshot, now he runs back to his Reddit to respond, where very few of his fans will actually see, and he'll be less pressed on the subject. Now, the French girl exists, and he has to produce these fantastical explanations for the entire situation. The exact same thing he did today. I'll even link this Reddit post in the description if you'd like to check it out. At what point will we admit that the hard truth is just that, the truth? For most Pyro fans, probably never. And why are people so accepting of Pyrocynical's response? Because they want to be. His own subreddit has been spreading lies about Ivory and me for weeks, and his original response on Reddit was full of victim blaming and twisting the truth without really taking responsibility for what happened, which I stand by, and that's why so many people went on to pick it apart. If he was so happy to victim blame the first time, why am I supposed to believe that all of a sudden this current apology is sincere and he feels so bad? The original conclusion that I reached in my second video was not that Pyrocynical was a groomer or a pedophile, but that he was so depraved that he was willing to talk to basically anyone in a sexual manner, regardless of age. Here, Pyro is clearly afraid that some of the people he did this roleplay with are going to come out about it, and says he did it with so many people he can't even remember. I'm willing to bet that Pyro was so depraved and lustful that he was willing to talk to just about anyone, regardless of their age. And what did Pyrocynical say in his response?
When I was 19 and 20, I liked to take part in this degenerate furry roleplay with pretty much anyone that would reciprocate. And looking back on it now, the word cringe, that doesn't near do enough justice to how sad this all was.
Oh, weird. So is Pyrocynical innocent? Is Tom the master manipulator who lied about him? No. Even if Pyrocynical's claim, which that he did not know the age of Ivory at the time, is true, he had absolutely no excuse not to. And that's probably why my document was so widely spread. I'm willing to say that most people didn't even agree with it completely, but did have an issue with the irresponsibility of him using his platform that way. This is enough for me to say that Pyro is deplorable. As for the accusation that I'm just biased, which isn't something Pyro said, but rather implied, it's something that I've seen a lot of people say, that means nothing to me. I was a fan of Pyrocynical, saw these accusations, and I went into them believing that Ivory had completely lied. I came out on the other side with the opinion that apart from minor exaggerations, he was telling the truth, and that the commentary community had fucked up. My original issue with all of this was that the word grooming was being used as a scapegoat for all of the accusations being completely false, and Pyro doing nothing wrong. And in the end, what has happened again? While Pyro admits some wrongdoing in his video, his fans claim that his response was never bad in the first place. They don't criticize him for what he admits to doing, instead proclaiming him innocent in my comment section. Right back to where we started. Ivory is harassed and called a clout chaser and a liar, and now I'm also called a clout chaser and a liar. While none of these people have justification to do so, other than that Pyro gave a response. Whether it was good or not wasn't going to really matter to these people. I've said that Pyro was irresponsible with his platform and deserved to be called out for it. No one was doing it, and now people are excusing it again simply because he responded at all. The community at large is made up of spineless fools who will constantly flip-flop on issues rather than actually having a solid opinion. One minute he's completely innocent, one minute he's framed by the public. It's just pathetic. People claim that Pyro disproved everything and that my videos are now null, and that everything is paper thin. Pyro's video itself managed to convincingly disprove one argument. The rest he admits to. He acts like a victim when the reason all of this happened is his own fault, because as an adult, he sexted minors on Discord, and there's no real wiggle room there. Hats off to another YouTuber who has to admit to being a sexual degenerate. Lots of people have seemed to claim that I am merely a clout chaser who is insulting Pyro and going after him for views. If you take one look at my backlog of videos and the work I've collaborated with others on, it's obvious that I have time and time again defended people who did not deserve the hand they were dealt. YouTubers who have had completely false allegations made against them. I know these allegations inside and out, and that's not what is happening here. I have much more to gain from lying and saying that Pyro did absolutely nothing wrong and that Ivory is a clout chaser. That is exactly what the majority of the public wants, but that's simply the wrong thing for me to do, and I will not. There is a long history of degenerate, unjustifiable behavior from Pyrocynical. This story is far from over. Thanks for watching and listening to what I have to say. I've been Turkey Tom, and until next time, leave me alone.